Hi and good morning on this glorious weekend with amazing weather so far. And it's been a while since we've spoken. And the dental world in the UK has been slightly different over the last couple of weeks as everyone's been returning to work and preparing to return to work for those that haven't been able to get ready in time due to all the challenges that have come out to face us. Saying that and putting that to one side, we wanted to continue with the interviews that we started doing with the BDA a few weeks ago. Now, it was only a couple of weeks ago since the last interview, but it feels like a hell of a lot longer than that with everything that's been going on. So it's an absolute pleasure to welcome back Len D'Cruz to give us a real update on what's been going on behind the scenes and what we can expect over the next couple of weeks. Brilliant. Thank you again for joining us, Len. It's an absolute pleasure to have you. It was a great update last time, and hopefully it's been a couple of weeks. There's a lot that's been happening in the dental world. I think the dental world has very firmly changed forever in the last few months. How are you and how's everything been going?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is, 2 weeks is a very long time in COVID, or as certainly before. I think we probably hadn't gone back to work then, so we're back at work. So June the 8th was D-Day. The challenging thing, I think, is that a lot of practices haven't gone back to work. Partly because they thought that they weren't supposed to go back to work, and that's quite challenging. So it depends obviously which country you're in. If you're in England, technically you should be back to work on June the 8th. Other countries is just sort of heading back, sort of Scotland and Northern Ireland are going back at different rates, but certainly for England, that has been the issue. But of course, concern has been, should I go back to work? Whether you're a private practice or a mixed practice, you had different views about that. And the issue really was people still thinking I should be doing AAA, kind of misunderstood or misread the Chief Dental Officer's return to work guidance. And essentially it says, obviously the priority is for people who are who've been waiting for the last 10 weeks for emergency treatment. They should be the first people to look after. Then you kind of move on to high needs patients or incomplete treatment. Then you kind of move on to routine care. But of course, if you've rattled through all those patients in the first week, well, then you're thinking, why am I still doing this? Let me crack on, do some routine care. But people weren't doing that. So for me, the message is kind of look at the source guidance. Look at the guidance from the BDA's toolkit. Look at the guidance from the Chief Dental Officer and NHS England, and look at that guidance. Don't rely on social media. Don't rely on your friends. Don't rely on WhatsApp, because there's a lot of stuff out there which is just frankly incorrect, or there's an echo chamber. People just regurgitate the same stuff, and if you repeat it enough times, it becomes the truth. And actually, it's misunderstood or whatever. So, and not willfully misunderstood, but just misunderstood because they weren't aware of the stuff. And so I'd always say read the source documents. All the answers are there. I think the guidance and sort of clarity on treatments is there. The big thing. I was on a webinar last night, which was hosted by the London Federation. 3,000 people registered. So it was myself, the Chief Dental Officer, Sarah Hurley, John Mill from CQC, Sandra White from PHE, Pepe Sherlow from London, LDN, and Ian Mills from the faculty. And we had a good hour and a half chat about these things. But it became really obvious that everybody's produced guidelines, and still people are not really sure what to follow. But what is quite clear is that the guidance simply is there is guidance out there. It's not the law. And what you should be doing is following that guidance. You can adapt it for your own practice, for your own standard operating procedures. And if that, and as long as you're using professional judgment, as long as you have a sensible decision, which you can rationally explain as to why you've done what you've done, you'll be fine. And CQC confirmed that. General Dental Council, Stefan Kanowski, said the same thing today at a meeting we had today. He says, we're not micromanaging people. You're professional people. and the message is kind of trust your judgment. You're professional people. You're not doing. You're out to look after patients. So, and the reason why you're so worried is not because you're worried about. You're worried because you're concerned that you're doing the wrong thing. So I think my message, certainly having listened to this thing for the last couple of weeks, is basically follow the guidance, obviously, but adapt it for your practice. But it's very, very, very important that if you write up your SOP, that you actually change it, adapt it. For example, classic example is if you're reducing your fallow time, your fallow time from 60 minutes down to 45 minutes or 30 minutes, and you've got good reason to do so because you've got air extractors or whatever, then fine, put it into your SOP, explain why you've done it. That should be fine. And you might find, for example, that surgery 1, 2, and 3 has a fallow time of 60 minutes. The others, because they've got air extractions, they've got windows, they've got whatever, they'll be reduced down to 30 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever. So do that, and you'll be fine. You really will be fine.
Another question that pops up constantly on social media and WhatsApp, not that we should believe everything on WhatsApp, but is regarding that very point, actually, with regards to fallow time. So a lot of people are asking, is there any comeback or potential comeback for anyone in the future if they decide to, let's say they do put extractor fans in, not fans, but extraction units, etc. in, and decide to reduce it to 45 minutes or 30 minutes. But at some point, a complaint comes in the future and they get investigated for that reason. How do they prove that I mean, everyone can do their own research, but at the moment, we have no genuine proof for any of these things apart from what the guidance has told us.
Yeah, good point. Absolutely good point. I mean, and it is very difficult because I've seen all sorts of totting up systems, and you say, well, actually, if I use rubber dam, this is 4 points. If I use high volume suction, it's 5 points. And if I'm doing the AGP for only 5 minutes, it's another 20 points. You add them all up, you can knock off by 10 minutes, 15 minutes. All of what that's just arbitrary, completely arbitrary. So I think if you've done we're talking about 6 air changes or 4 air changes. Who's actually measuring it? So you're absolutely right. Their evidence is pretty scant. But but on the one extreme, if you've got closed, you've got a windowless room, and you've got no air extraction units, no other means of mitigation, and you say actually we're down to 20 minutes, people can say, well, how did you come to that? But if you've got some other sort of element to say, well, this is what I've done. There are windows open, there are air extraction units, there's high volume suction, whatever, and we've actually got it down to 45 minutes or 30 minutes. People say that's perfectly. You give me a rational reason for it, that'll be fine. So I think, and as you change your, and also as you're aware, the FGDP were very clear about aerosol generating exposure as opposed to AGPs, and so they said, and they allied it quite sensibly to the threat level. So we're at threat level 3. We could be in threat level 2 before long, and it's very clear. One of the discussions we had today with the GDC and CDO and CQC is basically looking at producing guidance about that move from 3 to 2, because that's quite significant. Most of the guidance from the FGDP lumps 4, 3, and 3, 4, and 5 together. When you jump to 2, that's quite a significant decrease in the level of circulating virus in the community. And again, what you want to do is make sure that, and one of the things we're quite keen on is having sort of guidance from one source, all of which everybody contributes to it, come up with a source, so that nobody's just getting whiplash thinking, I'm looking for one source to the next. So that's kind of, I think the collaboration that's going to come out of COVID should be good. We're not racing to compete with each other to produce toolkits as fast as we can. We're in the same space. We're trying to do the same job. We're all kind of invested in trying to get a good, get back to normal. Whatever that normal happens to be. So yeah, I think that would be a good thing going forward.
Could the profession ever get into a position where they are united on something like this? Because I'll be honest, the last couple of weeks as a practice owner have been an absolute total nightmare. We've had regulations coming from all sorts of places. The FGDP came out first, and then the others sort of trickled through over the next couple of days after that. Pretty much, I mean, all of them were saying virtually similar things, but there were distinct differences between a few of them. And as a practice owner, who do you follow? Who do you believe? And even if the CDO office themselves are releasing guidance, you follow that, you follow the FGDP, you follow the BDA. I mean, it was pretty messy.
It is, and I think that was the sort of comment I was making yesterday. It's about the primacy of evidence, basically, or primacy of whose guidance do you follow? And I was quite, we had a sort of discussion. John Milne was saying, well, from CQC's perspective, and as far as GDC's perspective, it's very much, it has to be Public Health England. You follow their guidance, and he says as far, if it's good enough for the GDC, it's good enough for CQC. So I said, okay, well, as it happened, I actually happened to have a quote from the GDC's guidance very specifically, and what it said was the process of determining whether it's safe will involve carrying out the necessary risk assessments and having regard to relevant guidance issued by professional bodies, the government, other statutory bodies in the NHS. So the word was having regard. Having regard is a very legal solicitor type thing. It doesn't say you have to follow it. It doesn't say it's the law. It says have regard. So if you've had regard to those particular bits of guidance, you say, actually, you know what, I've had regard to them, and actually I'm going to do this. As long as it's, there are some things that are, as far as PHE concerned, are absolutely things that can't be violated. But the problem is there's no evidence behind those things. So the classic is about PPE, about fit testing PPE, not about people, but fit testing masks. And the discrepancy across the world is palpable. You can see that other countries don't do fit testing, other countries don't have the same fallow period as we do, and it is the same virus, but we're adopting different things for it. And I can understand national countries have done very different things about social distancing and stuff. We've chosen 2 meters, other countries have chosen 1.5 meters. So it's up to us, the country, to do what we do. But when you've got, with professional bodies doing something completely different, you wonder where the evidence comes from. So that's kind of where the challenge is to say, you haven't got any evidence, but you're sticking absolutely rigidly to this. Well, tell me why. So I think what the 4th of July is they are due. There's a rapid review of AGP and fallow times, which is coming up from PHE and SDCEP, and hopefully by the 4th of July they'll have more definitive. Either there won't be any research because it's impossible to do that research in that sort of time, but they're going to come up with more guidance, and I hope it'll be more practical. But we can only wait. The only important thing to say is that this isn't going to go on forever. As the threat level drops, almost certainly we will be out of fit testing, we'll be out of fallow time at that point. So it's not that people should go and spend loads and loads of money on infrastructure. You won't need to. It's going to go.
I mean, are we talking months, or are we talking at this point? It's probably different.
There's no timeline, and I suppose it's the government threat level basically. As soon as it drops to 2, then we're in a different. Obviously, threat level 1 is there's no virus in the community. That may be some time away, but the drop to level 2 is it's been contained. So actually that's that is a different threat level, and so. Once you get to that, and we're heading towards that, we can only wait. So I can't imagine it's going to be many months, basically.
How clear is the guidance from dropping from level 3 to 2 at the moment? Do we need to wait for any more updated guidance for that? Because what I envisage, or what I don't want to happen, and I'm sure everybody else in the dental profession as well, is to have a similar situation to before, where we've got a period of ambiguity. And I know the current guidance that's come out has covered the different threat levels, but I'm assuming there's going to be more updates coming out that explains what that will entail in terms of dropping from 3 to 2, and what the limitations will be for normal general dental practitioners in the NHS and private.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of where we're heading towards this sort of group today with the GDC, CQC, BDA, FGDP, and simply saying, listen, we know it's coming. It's going to have to come. So let's just get our ducks in a row. Let's actually sit around the table and say, when it arrives, this is exactly what we want the profession to do, without any sort of transition or waiting for guidance, or we don't want to be sidestep. We don't want to be taken aback when the government suddenly says it's 2, and you're thinking, what do we do now? So you're absolutely right. I think it's really important, and Sarah Hurley's conscious of that. The disarray that will happen if suddenly we go to 2 and people said, so now what happens? Do we follow the FGDP guidance because they said something? What is the CDO going to say? So yeah, I think it's important. I think the CDO is very conscious of that, and having some collaboration about that in advance of it happening, because we know it's going to happen.
Absolutely. I mean, is there any hope that the profession can work together to release one unified set of guidance?
The proof will be in the pudding. We can only try. It'll be it'll be the first time it happens. But it's a clinical issue, so it's not contractual. It's not money. It's not a commissioning. It's not an NHS private issue. This is purely clinical stuff. So we should have a reasonable stab at saying this is where we're at. But it's the proof's in the pudding. It's going to be down to PHE saying ultimately, they're going to be the government's going to be driven by Public Health England saying it's safe to do X, Y, and Z. And it's going to be down to their sort of leadership and their sort of pragmatism, in a sense.
And I mean, what's the BDA's role in this so far? A lot of people have been talking all over social media and just in general, really. And early on, the BDA's involvement was very good. And I think a lot of people have lost touch with possibly what's going on with the BDA, maybe. So just really as more of an update, what's been going on behind the scenes, what's everyone been working on?
Yeah, so I mean, so what is interesting is I'm part of a sort of a COVID catch-up, as it were, at 9:30 every day. So that includes me, includes head of marketing Julie Marshall, includes James Goldman, head of legal services. The three other country national leads, so Tristan Kelso, Philip, and Caroline Seddon, and also our internal team, Richard Harris from compliance, Ashley from head of comms. So we actually have a heads of department meeting every day to keep everybody keep on tabs on what's going on, and obviously that links with the website, and which Martin Illy Wilson picks up every day and puts blogs on there and updates it every day. So members should be pretty familiar with what's going on in terms of what the national sort of thing is going on, basically. But it's very much. Pretty well everything that's going on in dentistry we know about. So with NHS, so things like contract reform, the issue at the moment is abatement. There is actually a meeting going on right now this afternoon with NHS England. It's kind of crunch time because we've been at this for literally the last 5-6 weeks. So we're looking for abatement, a figure on abatement. We're looking for nothing for UDCs, but we're also looking for a figure, and there's lots of figures being banded around, so hopefully those figures will come out either today or probably Monday as to what those figures are going to be. So and that's something that's going on pretty well every day. They have Tuesday meetings, Thursday meetings. There's a catch-up. CDO had a catch-up with Martin at lunchtime today. So those meetings are kind of going on in the background, I think members should be reasonably confident that we know what we're doing. We're on the front foot. The concern might be that people may think actually the BAPD, the British Association of Private Dentists, have taken a march on us at the BDA, but actually, we're acutely aware of what private dentists particularly, but also mixed practices are dealing with. And we have the ear of the government. Jo Churchill, she released a statement yesterday saying how good dentists are, how well it's been working the BDA. And again, we have sort of regular contact with Jo Churchill, who's the MP and lead for dentistry. So, I think we're there, and we're there, and the other example is Northern Ireland Health Select Committee for Northern Ireland. We had Mick Armstrong from the Health Select Committee in England, all of which is a huge amount of work to brief the dentists in front of those panels. A lot of research, a lot of figures, a lot of research that goes behind those things. And I think people sometimes forget you're actually in front of a Health Select Committee. MPs are going to grill you. You need to know your stuff. Mick Armstrong spent a lot of time with our team trying to, making sure he knew the ins and outs of the sort of questions people would chuck at him. And likewise, Northern Ireland, Tristan Kelso and the team up there had to face the Assembly and the Health Select Committee there. A lot of preparation, a huge amount of preparation required for that.
Absolutely. What would you say are the big challenges for the BDA in the next couple of weeks?
I think the challenges, I think the two big challenges, I think, are trying to sort out the next stage for contract reform. It's a big thing. It's a huge opportunity for the BDA and the government to grasp hold of these changes and say, UDAs are dead, item of service is dead in Northern Ireland and Scotland, and we should be looking at something completely different. But it's not as though we haven't been talking about it. We've been talking about it for the last 9 years through the Parliament program. Nothing is new here. It's a question of the government saying yes, let's run with it. And Sarah Hulley was saying, hopefully we can get this done by Christmas. I'm thinking, which Christmas are we talking about? Because this has been going for a long time. So we know the plan. It's just a matter of somebody grasping the nettle and saying, yes, we'll take it up. The commissioners ought to take this up. So I think that's our big task, is to do that. I think the other big task, unfortunately, is actually managing expectations for associates and staff staff. If we start with associates, there are a number of associates who haven't got paid. They've had their contracts terminated without notice, and they are associates very much on the back foot. They aren't as they're not being valued by their practices, and I think that's a real challenge. So the BDA have had 500-600 associate disputes to deal with, but they're running out of options to help them, because if the practice is not going to play ball, they're not going to pay them. Well, the only thing they've got up their sleeve is a civil dispute, which is messy, it's expensive. So and we've asked there are various things the NHS could do, which again are not particularly savoury, because it means there are imposing various sanctions on practices and stuff like that, which is not really what we want to be doing. But it may come to that stage. So I think that, and then the concern is, as we go back to work, what the economy is going to look like in terms of private practices, the income. Will hygienists still have jobs? Will nurses still have jobs? So I think we're not out of the woods yet. There is a long way to go before we settle practices and settle down exactly what's happening in terms of going forward, basically. So yeah, it is a challenge.
Absolutely. I mean, we touched on finances affecting practices and things, but financial impact of PPE purchasing and on practices and sort of further training and things. How is that impacting the profession? How will that impact the profession moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably more. It created more concern than it ought to, because I think the history of cost of PPE, you're in practice, you're a practice owner, you in preparation for it, you'd have bought shed loads of PPE at ridiculously expensive costs, because you want to be ready. You want to be ready when we start working, and lots of practices have done exactly the same. And in some cases, they discovered that the PPE they've got is fake, and so that there is a problem. But those costs are going to go down. They're going to go down pretty significantly going forward. The sort of wise that the sort of word in the streets is that the reason why a lot of this is expensive is because it came by air freight. From China, but it came by air freight, so which made it more expensive. So as soon as we go down to shipping, which is supposedly 6, 7, 8 weeks away, those costs will come down dramatically. So I don't think people should be worried too much about PPE costs, and also potentially, as we go down to threat level 2, the amount of PPE used, or indeed the quality of the PPE, the grade of PPE, may drop down to fluid resistant masks. So again, we need to look at this as a short-term thing. If you buy thousands of pounds worth of masks in the expectation it's going to be there for the next 6 months, I'm not sure it is, and you've just kind of wasted your money, basically. So I'd be careful about the investments you make going forward. The costs will drop, the availability will become easier, and potentially the requirement may drop as well.
Just to go back to the NHS reform conversation earlier, I mean, could this provide us with an opportunity to genuinely revolutionise the NHS system moving forward, or is that more of a pipe dream?
No, I think there's a genuine reason for doing it. I think there's enough people understanding it. The Health Select Committee, Jeremy Hunt has said that he's is quite keen on looking. There will be a detailed look at it. They are at Northern Ireland. We had the same discussion. They were absolutely flabbergasted at the oral health or the poor oral health in Northern Ireland. When you start looking at the figures here, the effect that COVID may have had in the last 10 weeks on oral health, or increasing oral health inequalities, I think it's a pretty stark sort of thing. They'll realize that dentistry is not about filling teeth, it's actually about preventing in the first place. And this is just a fantastic opportunity to do that. Once they get their head around it, I think the big challenge for the government is going to be patient charge revenue. A significant amount of money that's spent on dentistry actually comes from the patient. And unless you can replace that with a comparable system, because capitation works perfectly well for the dentist, but it doesn't work well for the Treasury. So actually trying to have a compatible system, we're never going to necessarily square that circle, but the Treasury, either the government's going to fund more money into it, which they're not going to do, or the money's got to come from the patient in some form or other in terms of patient charges. So I think that's what's holding it all up. I think there's the will from the profession, there's a will from the office of the chief dental officer. The NHS commissioners, to be fair, are also pushing for it. In the end, it's down to the Treasury to make that, to press a button on that.
Well, watch this space then.
Yeah, absolutely. Watch this space.
Brilliant. Any final words or comments?
No, I think we have got great opportunities. I think we are going to start to emerge from COVID, and I think the practices should start to be confident about doing it. I mean, there are a lot of practices in London who haven't gone back to work because they're fearful, because they're not ready, and also perhaps because the 1/12 of pay, they're a fully NHS practice, there kind of is no real incentive to go back to work, because if you're not having to do UDAs, there's no real incentive to go to work. The incentive for most people ought to be their patients, their patient care. There are patients waiting for your practice. My practice has had people phoning up regularly saying, "I can't get hold of a dentist. Could I come to your practice?" And you're thinking, why is that happening? And because practices are closed, they either haven't got the manpower, or they've said we're not opening, and we're still doing 3As. So it puts a burden on the rest of the practices who are open, like your practice and like my practice. So people should just go back to work, look after the patients, and be safe.
Well, ending on a positive, hopefully. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for your time.
No problem. Nice talking to you, Alan. Cheers. Bye now.